All right. Good morning, everyone. I am Bill Rawlings, Chair of the California Workforce Pathways Joint Advisory Committee for 2023. I want to thank you for joining today's meeting. Due to the pandemic, today's meeting is being conducted virtually. I ask for everyone's patience as we navigate through today's meeting. Today's meeting is being broadcast through a live webcast. Interested parties can view the broadcast by visiting the California Workforce Pathways webpage and clicking on the live webcast link located under the 2023 public meeting notices, agenda, and minutes. A recording of the webcast will be archived at the California Workforce Pathways webpage in about a week. I have the following announcements to ensure a smooth meeting. Please keep all microphones on mute. All attendance and motions will be taken by roll call. Committee members will use the raise hand feature in a live webcast to be recognized for providing a comment or question. And I will ask for public comment for each agenda item and again at the end of the meeting. Public comments can be made via a live webcast, email, or by phone, and all options are displayed on the posted agenda. Today, we have a number of items to cover. First, we will have an update on the California State Career Technical Education Plan, which will include a review of the implementation planning phase. Then we will conclude today's meeting with an update on the CTE state initiatives, the CTE incentive grant, and the K-12 Strong Workforce Program data metrics, which is something I know we've talked about a bit in the past, and we should have an exciting year focused around that. Since we have to have a quorum to continue, please call the roll.
Chair Rawlings.
Present.
Member Grande.
Present.
Member Escobedo.
Here.
Member McQuillan.
Here.
Member Rodriguez.
Present.
Member Williams. And ex officio member McGuire.
All right. It sounds like we have a quorum. It is now 9:36. I will call the meeting to order. And before we get to the first agenda item, Rachel, would you please announce the staff who are supporting the meeting?
Good morning. Here at the department, we have myself, Rachel Moran, Staff Services Manager 1 in the Career and College Transition Division, Pete Callis, Division Director of the Career and College Transition Division, Michaela Bertacchini, Analyst in the CCTD, Colby Franklin, Manager over the Career Technical Education Leadership Office. Joining us virtually from our AMARD office are Mark Riera, Thomas Bjorkman, and Corey Benton. And then from the Chancellor's office, virtually, we have LaCandice Ochoa, Linda Fan, Sandra Sanchez.
All right. Very good. So that gets us to item number 1, which is the approval of our preliminary report of action draft minutes. So I would like to seek the approval of the preliminary report of action draft minutes for our March 3rd, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll move acceptance of the preliminary report of action from the March 10th, 2023 meeting.
All right. It's moved by Grande. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Second by Member Escobedo. So with that, are there any comments from committee members on the minutes? Right. Seeing no hands, is there any comment from the public? All right, seeing none, and just wanted to double check, Rachel, no hands raised or no comments coming in virtually.
Sorry, I was
All
checking various avenues, and there's no public comment on this item.
All right, super. I know that takes a minute. You got a lot of things to check. And so with no public comment, would we please call the roll?
Chair Rawlings.
Yes.
Member Escobedo.
Yes.
Member Grande.
Yes.
Member Rodriguez.
Yes.
Member Williams. Okay.
All right, that passes. So that gets us to item number 2. So I'd like to welcome Pete Callis, Director of the Career and College Transition Division, to guide the committee through the update on the California State Plan for Career Technical Education Project.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. So our next steps for the California State Plan for CTE are really working on the implementation plan with the field. We actually introduced the plan and presented the plan to State Board of Education last Thursday, and then this past Monday we presented the plan to the Board of Governors at the California Community College Chancellor's office. So both entities now are aware of the plan. We got a lot of positive comments from both groups about the work that we've done on this and just what the plan is all about. So our next steps are really working on the implementation piece with the field. So again, significant changes to the structure of our economy, reasons why this plan is so important, and ways Californians live, learn, and work. Just with the pandemic and looking at what we've been through and just the changes in our state, this plan is vital at this point right now, and really working towards getting out to the implementation with the field. Looking at global trends such as digitization, automation has impacted skills demanded in the labor market, and then access to post-secondary education. And trainings, which this plan is all about. It's just providing that guidance on a local and regional level to make a difference for our students, really K through 16 moving forward. The key drivers for the plan is to set a course, the strategic plan for achieving, sorry, I gotta pause here for a second. Student and worker success in meeting employers' future work needs. And really, for us to work with employers and work with the field to see what, that region is really in need of. And, as we worked on this plan, we also talked about it being not set and being able to make those changes as the economy changes, as employer needs change, and having that flexibility and make those changes. We wanted to improve equity, access, and outcomes across the state. We're a diverse geography and diverse group of people in the state. And then align, strengthen, and bring cohesion to current efforts that are going on out there in the work field. And then build on existing efforts and spur innovation. And then use current and future levels and sources of funding strategically at a regional level. So the regions will be able to work on braiding their funding and really making those decisions on a regional, local level on what they really want to do with their funding. Those were a lot of the comments that we received in the public comment, 45-day public comment period. And so as we've worked with people and talked to people in the field, we've stressed this point that it's their local and regional decisions that are going to make a difference, using this plan as guidance. In the first 3 years, we really have 4 goals that we want to be able to achieve: boost data-informed decision-making for equity and impact. We want to expand work-based learning in all regions with equity, and then grow dual enrollment in all regions with a focus on equity. And then finally, understand and plan to address CTE teacher and faculty shortages, which has come up in every meeting I've been a part of over the last year. And not just with CTE programs, but with a number of programs that we have in our division and how we're trying to deal with these shortages that are out there right now. So for regional implementation, strategizing for regional implementation convenings, we actually are looking at doing 10 convenings at this point in multiple regions. Resources and tools to support implementation and state and regional implementation plans. So we want to assist through these convenings, assist the regions in developing tools and being able to have those tools to use and share across regions for the implementation of the state CTE plan. And then use outcomes metrics and benchmarks that are aligned to priorities in the state plan. All right. The goal is to convene a broad range of interest holders from each region, including K-12 and post-secondary education, the private sector, workforce boards, and community-based organizations in order to support the regional teams in planning for implementation and building on promising practices. We want to be able to share those best practices that are developed in regions across the entire state. Support strategic alignment of activities and existing funding streams across sectors and institutions. Build understanding and catalyze action on the California State Plan for career technical education, and then engage in peer learning, idea sharing, and knowledge exchange. So we're able to do that across regions and looking at each of the industry sectors and how they're being impacted in each of the regions. And as we develop those tools and really helping each other out and providing that technical assistance going forward. So what we did for participating in regional implementation convening, CDE and the Chancellor's office sent out a communication through their listserv. We requested for them to complete a letter of interest and submit it to our email address for the project by 5 p.m. by May 4th. The letter of interest must include a signature of at least one LEA superintendent and one community college president or their designees is how we left it. The letter of interest, information on proposed participants, answers to the following questions. Why are you interested in participating in a regional implementation meeting? What priorities and goals do you have for your region? How do they align with the aims and goals of the California State Plan for CTE? How would participation advance pathways work in your region? What does your institution hope to achieve by participating in a regional implementation convening? Are you able to host a convening? So that's what we expected in the letter for being able to participate in these convenings. So we received, and we had it broken down into 3 regions: Northern California, Central California, and Southern California. Letters of interest by region, we received 11 from the Northern region, 4 from the Central, and 13 from the Southern. And so we are looking at strategically how we can host in these regions, in these requests that we received, and to best fit for that region and be strategic about their location. And, you know, some of our regions, the Southern region is very populated, it's huge, and deciding on how to host the region so they have equal access to it. Looking at the Northern region, they're very spread out, and being able to access a convening in person may be an issue. So we have been discussing also doing a regional convening. We haven't nailed that one down yet, but we are working on that. So this is where we're at with this. We will start the convenings in the fall once we decide on who will host one of the 10, each of the 10, and we'll move forward at that point, and we'll probably be able to give you an update at our November meeting that we have for this committee.
All right. Thank you, Pete. So I'm going to ask committee members for the comments, I think, and then we'll ask for public comment. I think I'll lead off with the first one is the central region of the state. We got 4 letters of interest compared to, I think, 11 and 14 for the other 2. Is there any particular outreach that we might be doing in that central region? Or if someone offers to host, would we then reach out and try and encourage other LEAs to participate and join in?
Yes, we will. Definitely.
All right. Great. All right. Members, any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any hands getting raised, right? So I think that will take us to our public comment then. And are there any members of the public that would want to comment on this item? I don't see any hand raised in the Zoom.
There was one question in the Q&A from Leslie was,
Okay.
can there be one meeting associated with each community college regional consortia? There are 8 consortia.
Okay. And so I think that takes care of public comment. If there aren't any other public comments, is that correct?
Correct. There seems to be no other public comments.
All right. Then that will take us to item number 3, which is the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant and the K-12 Strong Workforce Program update. So with that, I will invite back Pete Callis, Director of the Career and College Transition Division, to give us an update on the metrics. Pete.
All right. Thanks, Chair Rawlings. So this is exciting. We've been able to look at some more data and dive a little deeper. We have our data team on the call also today. So we will possibly ask them to comment on some of this. They're really excited about what we have been able to find on CTE programs across the state. And so we'll start out with just the overview of our metrics, because each year the committee's supposed to make recommendations whether we want to stay with these metrics that we already have, and then be able to move forward with them. And we've had discussions in the past 2 years about, we would hold off on making any changes based on whether we can get really accurate data on all of the metrics. And if not, we could consider adding some metrics or changing what we have in the group. So as we've seen in the past, metric number 1, number of pupils completing CTE coursework. So indicator 1A, the number of pupils completing one career technical education course. And then 1B, the number of pupils who complete at least 300 hours of course sequence in an industry pathway. The sequence includes the capstone course, and the CTE student receives a grade of C- or better in the capstone, so they would receive that credit as a pathway completer. Indicator 1C, the number of pupils completing 2 CTE courses, and we're working on getting that data from the 2020-21 cohort. And then indicator 1D, the number of pupils completing more than 2 CTE courses, but does not reach a CTE completer status as defined above during the 4-year cohort period. And we're looking at that data also from 2020-21 cohort. And so for indicator 1A, and these are graphs that we've seen in the past, we have the number of students completing one course, all students, and then we have our CTIG-funded students, and so CTIG-funded programs. As you can see, the completion rate is higher for the programs that are funded through CTIG and some of our other CTE funding sources. 1B, this is pathway completers. We're still a higher rate with the CTIG funding on these. And then we move to metric 2, high school graduation rate. Indicator 2A, unduplicated aggregate count of pupils in the adjusted cohort for the graduating class, where the LEA has identified the pupil as having completed one CTE course during their 4-year cohort. And then for 2B is the same as 1B, which is completing a pathway. So looking at graduation rates for these students as they complete either one CTE course or complete a pathway. And we have similar information about 2C and 2D as we did for 1C and 1D. And as you can see, our CTIG CTE participants, their graduation rate for the 2019-20 cohort is about 6% higher than all students in that cohort. And then looking at indicator 2B, it goes even higher with our CTIG CTE completers, and they're at 97% graduation rate, where their overall graduation rate was 84.2%. And metric 3, number of pupils meeting academic and career readiness standards as defined in the CCI associated with the California School Dashboard. And this is indicator 3A, the number of pupils meeting a score of level 2 standard nearly met on the Smarter Balance 11th grade English Language Arts Assessment. 3B is similar, and this would be for the Smarter Balance 11th grade Mathematics Assessment. 3C, the number of CTE completers is defined in the CCI associated with the California School Dashboard. And then 3D, the number of pupils completing college coursework as defined in the CCI associated with the California School Dashboard. So with these metrics, we see that, again, our rates are higher for those students that were completers and taking CTE courses. And then similar to 3B. And then 3C is the number of completers as defined in the CCI. So again, they're prepared. And so our rates of success with the Smarter Balance exams, it looks like we have a higher success rate for those students that were completers. And you know, my big question on this is, how is this associated? Because we'll look at their attendance here in a bit. How is this associated with their attendance? Because their attendance rates are much higher, does that give them an opportunity to be in the classroom more for all of their classes, right? If they're enrolled in a CTE course or they're completing that CTE pathway, are those two issues related? And that's in the back of my mind. Is it really making that difference for our students? And then 3D is just the percentages again of the CTE completers. The entire cohort, you know, their score was at 15.3%, and then with the CTE completers, we're at 26.6% for that cohort, completing dual enrollment coursework. So they have a higher rate of completion of dual enrollment when they're part of a CTE program. Metric 4, the number of pupils obtaining an industry-recognized credential, certificate, license, or other measure of technical skill attainment. And 4A, the number of CTE pathway completers obtaining industry-recognized certifications, and then the number of CTE pathway completers completing work-based learning experience. So we are still working on collecting data on metric 4. We're not there yet on having all of this being able to be measured. So that's been a concern of ours for a while. And deciding on locally what they recognize as an industry recognized certification, and not having, some states actually have a statewide list of industry recognized certifications. Our state is so big and we would have so many things to look at, it would be almost impossible to be able to cover everything and look at every single certification program. Metric 5, the number of former pupils employed and the types of businesses in which they're employed. And this is the survey data that we receive every year. And we've started looking at this data, but the problem is when we do the survey, the completion rate of the survey is not very high, and the return rate of the survey. So LEA's reached out to 56,000, so this is for indicator 5, 56,000 students to take the survey. 30,000 students provided valid responses out of the 491,000 students in the cohort. 25,000 of the 30,000 were CTE completers. And 25,919 students either refused to answer or could not be located. So that's the other issue, is locating our students and determining what is actually valid in their responses. Post-secondary education, military service, whether they're employed, and how many were in advanced training. So these are just our numbers from those areas, from the survey responses. And then these are all of our industry sectors and how many students that replied to the survey were part of one of these industry sectors. And some of the conferences I've participated in the past couple of years, speaking to other CTE directors across the nation, this is one of all of our issue is how do we get this data? And how do we get this data to be valid and accurate? So that's in all the states' minds. Some have made some progress in getting this put together, and a lot of them are in our situation where it's still survey data that we get back from our students. And then we move on to the last metric, number 6, the number of former pupils enrolled in each of the following. The first one is post-secondary education institution, a state apprenticeship program, a form of job training other than a state apprenticeship program. So again, 6A is the number of students in a post-secondary education institution, the number of CTA pathway completers enrolled in an apprenticeship program, and then 6C, the number of CTA pathway completers enrolled in a form of job training other than a state apprenticeship program. Okay, so those are our metrics that we've been using for the past 3 or 4 years. And this year, we started looking at other ways to check how our CTE programs are impacting our students in California. And total attendance rate based on the 2020-21 cohort, total attendance rate calculated by the totaling the actual days attended divided by the total expected attendance days. 3 out of 4 years of cohort data are included. Academic year 2019-20 is excluded from the calculations. As we know, that was our first year of the pandemic and when we shut down in March. So we did not include attendance data from that year for this cohort. And then other attendance, and so our CT outcome data. So we looked at attendance and then graduation rates. That shouldn't be there. All right, total attendance rates for 2020-21 cohort. Non-CT participants, so students that did not take any CT courses, their attendance rates overall was 89.4%. For CTE dabblers, or CTE students that took one course, their attendance rate went up by about 5%. For CTE participant dabblers, the definition of dabblers is taking 2 CTE courses that are not related in a sequence for a pathway completer. Their attendance went up by about 6% over the non-CTE participants. And then CTE completers, the ones that completed a pathway, their attendance rate was about 7% higher than the non-CTE participants. And then this is by academic year for those groups and the average days that they were absent. So in 18-19, this cohort, students averaged just under 12 days of absence. And then in 2021-22, it went up to 18.2%. So then we looked at our numbers for attendance by gender and non-CTE participants. Again, you can see the numbers here. As you go down the list, their attendance rate increases based on how big of a CTE program that they're enrolled in. But it is about, anywhere from 6% higher than non-CTE participants up to about 11% above. And then we looked at it by race and to see, what our CTE completers look like to our non-CTE students. As you can see, even by race, our numbers are higher than the non-CTE participants. And then this is from DataQuest. average, just looking at average stays absent for those students and by race. And then we looked at socioeconomic disadvantaged and looking at their attendance rates based on being a non-CTE participant and then the 3 levels of CTE participation. So again, it goes up as we move through completion rates for the CTE pathways. So if you look at non-CTE participants for socioeconomically disadvantaged, they are at 88.2%, and then the CTE completers in that group, they're about 8%, 8.2% higher in their attendance rate. So they are going to school, they're going to their classes, and I think making a difference for themselves. And I think that difference, just from what we've seen, is that engagement with their CTE pathway courses. And then we were asked at the March meeting to look at regions and how regions are impacted for attendance rates. And again, the numbers are very similar as the rest of the numbers have been across the board. And we looked at the 7 regions, and then these are the regions, the key to the regions for all the counties participating in each region. So this is a distribution of students in each region from the cohort 2020-21. And as you can see, the CTE completers and dabblers are pretty consistent for percentages of students that are in each of those categories. Region 5, actually, Region 4 has the highest CTE completers. So Region 4 is Alpine, Fresno, Kern, Kings, Madera, so Central Valley, really, Central California, has the highest rate of CTE completers. And the lowest rate is at 13%, but there's a cluster between 13 and 15. And the 13% is Region 3, which is Alameda, Contra Costa, so the major area of the Bay Area has the lowest rate of CTE completers. And then we looked at attendance rates by industry sector, and they are pretty consistent. They're all right around, for their completers, they're right around 95% attendance rate all the way through each of the industry sectors. And then we looked at graduation rates, and I know we've talked about this one in the past, and we can go through this one pretty quick because I think you've seen these numbers. But for this cohort, the graduation rate was pretty low, and I think that was impacted by that 1920 and impacting when they graduated. So the cohort graduation rate was 83.6% for that cohort. And then we looked at it by gender, by race. So again, CT completers by race, the graduation rate is almost all 98% and above. And this is the same information, just as the cohort graduation rate by race. And then the different rates of CTE completion, single, the dabblers, and then the completers, total count of students. And we also looked at the socioeconomic disadvantaged group and looked at their graduation rates. And again, CTE completers for the SED group is almost 98%. And then we looked at the regions and the graduation rates. So just from looking at all of this, we found that our numbers are very consistent based on whether they're enrolled in one CTE course, whether they've taken two CTE courses that are not related, and then also being a pathway completer. So everything has been very consistent as we looked at the data across the board. And then we looked at industry sector. The distribution of students across each of the industry sectors for 3 levels of CTE. So that was a lot of data, but we've been really drilling down into this over the past year and really wanting to figure out if our CTE programs are making a difference for our students. We're hoping that what we found in the data is accurate and true. And any comments from our AMART group, Corey or Thomas?
Yeah, hi, this is Corey Ben. I'm the lead data specialist for the CTE data, and I just wanted to say that looking at these numbers, it does appear that students that are involved in the CTE program, it does have some positive outcomes, especially with the graduation rates, and the attendance rates seem to be higher. And so a lot of data is here. I mean, for me, it's one of those things where maybe we'd want to take some time at later date and just kind of take a look at them. There's some charts there that just add context, like those data quest charts, just to add some context to what you're looking at for the CT effect. And I do want to point out that this data does not take into account funding sources. So this is all students. I did not break this out by CTIC funded districts or directly funded charter schools. So this is all the students regardless of the funding source.
Thanks, Corey.
And the other thing too, this is Tom, I was just going to add to take into account when looking at the attendance data here. It was calculated by looking at all the attendance over the cohort window, which includes some attendance data from years prior to the pandemic. And just for some context, the chronic absenteeism is a big issue nationwide. It's an issue in California. It's an issue nationwide. And so if you look at chronic absenteeism data or attendance data on our own website or other websites, they're not usually looked at in this cohort window. So just wanted to provide that context that it includes kind of pre-pandemic attendance data, which is going to boost those rates a little bit.
Thanks, Thomas.
All right. Thank you both for that. Anything else, folks? Okay. So with that, we're going to open it up for member comments. And I'm going to start off with a couple of things. First, I think this is really rich data. I mean, I was going through, and even as you were just skipping through, I had just loads of questions popping up, right? And so one thing I'd ask is, we didn't get the slide deck in advance, I don't think. If you could send it out to all of the advisory committee members, and then even those that aren't here will be able to take some of that, digest it, and then if we have other questions, we can either ask it offline, or we'll be able to go and do a follow-up at the next meeting. And I may have some questions still pop up, but I want to get to the folks that raise their hand. And so I see Member Escobedo.
Yes, I'm just really curious about, some questions that came to my mind, and if some of these questions can be answered by maybe having also a qualitative approach in the research. For example, you stated that in the Central Valley, there's a higher degree of completers. Be interesting to find out why, right? And I wonder if we can establish, a small sample size of focus groups and try to investigate some of those overarching questions as you look at this quantitative data, and maybe sharing then perhaps some of those trends to other regions. Because obviously when you complete, enhances your ability to graduate from high school. There's a lot of positives by completing this course. So just a thought of perhaps establishing another level of research. Secondly, my second question is, there was a slide after the apprenticeship programs. I wasn't clear with that one. It looked like it was a duplicate from another slide, but it was a percentage of students that I believe entered an apprenticeship program. So or maybe I just missed that analysis.
We'll go back to that slide
Okay.
once we finish the meeting and look at it and make sure, and we'll include all the slides for all of you. And you're reading my mind when you came up with the qualitative piece, because that's something that we really want to look at for looking at best practices that we can share from one region to another. And you're right. Why is that happening in the Central Valley? Right. So I think that's something that we want to look into.
Thank you.
All right. Member Grande.
Thank you, Chair Rawlings. And I want to thank everyone for their help in putting this very data-rich presentation together. I could go down a rabbit hole and spend probably the next 4 hours asking questions about all of the outcome measures, but just a couple of comments and then a couple of questions. In terms of comments, I hope everyone realizes the incredible value that career technical education provides in the K-12 and community college system in preparing students not just to be successful in the coursework that they're embarking on, but completing a pathway. Whether it's a career technical education pathway or high school graduation or making it into post-secondary education, clearly our career technical education programs are serving us very well for the investment that we're making. The second comment, and this one looks at the geographical distribution of career technical education. We see that there's an incredible subscription in the Central Valley, and that does not surprise me because of the number of resources that are available to support students that might be undertaking career technical education, including high school social facilities and in the lower level of education. I'm thinking in terms of like 4-H and FFA programs, which clearly are agricultural based, but enhance the career technical education experience. And I would love to see more information about those social supports that might also be linked hand in hand with the subscription to career technical education. And then two questions. My first one, of course, is looking at the number of CTE students that are pathing into post-secondary education. Those numbers, I believe, were upwards of 20,000. I would love to know, and this is probably more along the lines of a qualitative study, how many of those used the foundational CTE they were exposed to in K-12 and then continued on a similar or related pathway as they migrated into post-secondary education. Are we really building that pipeline to practice that we're, premising so much of our initiatives on? If they are involved in a CTE healthcare pathway in K-12, are they pathing into post-secondary education that would still be considered a healthcare pathway? That'd be great information. And then the same would be true on the second question that I have regarding employment. And are we seeing that the employment is directly related to the CTE pathway that they were on in the K-12 or the post-secondary system? It would be phenomenal to know if we are really creating workers across the spectrum that have a lot of portability of skills, regardless of what CTE pathway they may have been on. We are just preparing individuals for the world of work. That would be phenomenal. But also whether or not we are finding that we are landing them in the pathway that they peruse during their K-12 experience. So once again, using like a healthcare pathway, are they landing jobs in healthcare? Or are they using it as a stepping stone with the skills that they have received in their CTE studies that have helped them make it through a majority of just work-based learning opportunities for the world of work at hand, regardless of what particular sector they may be in. But overall, I like I said, I could probably spend hours asking questions about the information, but I just want to give huge kudos to such a rich data presentation that was given to us this morning, and let you know there will be more questions, I'm sure, as soon as I have an opportunity to really dive deep into the slides. Thank you, Chair Rawlings.
All right. Thank you, Member Grande. Your questions were leading on some of mine, so I'm going to do some follow-ups to yours. But first, Member Rodriguez.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. And thank you so much for all of the work that's gone into gathering these metrics and this information that is useful for future planning. I won't reiterate a few of the things that I wanted to talk about that were already mentioned by Member Escobedo regarding the qualitative data, right? Wanting to know what's happening where some places are having, the Central Valley, that success. And also, Member Grande, I want to echo your comments as well regarding the completers, right? Are they going into professions inspired by the work that they're doing, or are they using the skills for something completely different? That would be information that I'm interested in knowing more about. And another thing that I'd like to talk about is, as I'm looking at this data, and when we saw this data at our last meeting regarding the attendance, that it's really not a surprise that when students, especially adolescents, feel connected to whether it's a group, right, a sense of belonging, they feel hopeful, because I think CTE builds hope for students. We give them, when we ask them, like, what are you going to do when you grow up? My students tell me that puts so much pressure on them. But when we show them what they can do when they grow up, it gives them hope, and it feels like it answers some questions that they have, and it gives them the opportunity to explore. I love the dabblers because they are exploring, and just the term, Mr. Callis, when you shared that at the board meeting, I really like that. And so anyway, I just, it doesn't surprise me that when students feel that they belong, right, just that social emotional component, and when they feel that sense of purpose, that they are doing something, that they're taking their knowledge and they're actually applying it in a way that answers, the question about adolescence is, how do we, or just teaching and learning and teaching, how do we take what we know and do something with it? And I think it fills a huge void for our adolescent population. So I want to thank everybody who participates in CTE and everyone who does work at this level, because it is so important. And lastly, I would love to see how some of the regions that have success, what their partnerships are with the community colleges, right? That how whether it's the dual enrollment or what it is that's happening, how the community colleges are supporting that, and also the regions, right? Imperial County is very different than Riverside and San Diego, and so perhaps drilling down a little bit into specific data regarding the counties. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Really, really great thoughts there. Member McQuillan.
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. I, too, share the same excitement as Member Grande and Member Rodriguez. It's really great to see this report, and thank you for all the work on it. And it's great to see school attendance, so good, and graduation rates being up for those involved in career technical education. It's really good to see. I think I heard the challenge that we have in trying to get reports back on who's gone to work and those out in the field. And I heard that. I thought Pete acknowledged that. And I know that would be a struggle to get those reports back of folks who are out there working in the world, But thank you for the report, and it's so exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got a few thoughts here, and one to Member McQuillan's point just now is I'm hoping that we are able to get past the hurdle of collecting this data about employment outcomes in other areas when we get the cradle to career data system, and that we actually have some alignment within the state on these things, and data sharing elements aren't those agreements aren't necessary for all of this work, that we can actually get in there and take a deeper look at it. And Member Rodriguez had made a couple of points about the feelings that students get when they're participating in these programs, and it made me think a little bit about the idea that CTE courses are giving our students an opportunity to experience some self-actualization, right? And I think that is definitely, as others have said, I think it's an area worthy of a deeper study and really taking a look at kind of the reasons behind why these metrics are so good, because you take a look at what's going on with equity gaps, right? I mean, across the board, whether it be regionally, whether it be by race, whether it be by gender, we're not just seeing an improvement in the outcomes. You're actually seeing that there is a level of gain among disadvantaged groups that are higher than the others, and that to me is demonstrating that there's a level of engagement by all of our student populations, all of the different cohorts, that is really leveling the playing field for educational outcomes. And that is something that I don't think anywhere else in the state we have really cracked that. And so digging into that piece, like what is leading from the all student cohort to this across the board kind of equitable level of completion in these populations, I think that's gold right there, right? I mean, we've got to spend the time and the money figuring out that reason, right? And it simply may be that this level of engagement for that population is so much higher because of how they're feeling as you're going through these programs. But then that leads us back to the question and the issue of we need to scale this, and in order to scale it, we need to be able to recruit the faculty to teach it. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to scale it. So we're back into this cycle where we're hitting some of the same common challenges along the way with it. But I think it's definitely something we need to study deeper. I think this kind of data, it would really be worthy of a really detailed study, like university level study for folks, and any folks going for their doctoral program in education maybe want to take a look at some of this. And so a question I had for you, Pete, was how much of this is getting shared out to the LEAs, this kind of data? Because I'm thinking that whether it comes to dual enrollment, whether it comes to the completion rates, whether it comes to these disadvantaged groups like you had listed there, our counselors and folks at the school sites know that get a student that they're concerned about into a CTE pathway, and boom, their outcomes are going to be so much better. And do our colleges, front of mind, kind of know that a school that has a high level of CTE participation might be a great target for dual enrollment? Are we giving that information out like this?
I would have to say, to tell you the truth, that this is not well known. and we really have to share this message. I think maybe the county folks do have this, but your regular superintendent, they know the value of CTE. However, like you so eloquently stated, how this can be a catapult to mitigate these achievement gaps that we've seen historically, I don't think it's well known unless you're one of those regional centers or connected to them and you've had that relationship. However, in general, when I work with superintendents or principals, and really principals is really, they're the ones that really help with the referral system, counselors as well. I think strategizing and how to get this message out would be very helpful.
Yeah, so to answer your question, Chair Rawlings, I'm not sure I think this is the first time at this level that we've really looked at this data and had to dive. It's never required on any reporting, really. And so, as we call ourselves, we're the CTE Data Geeks, this team that meets every Thursday afternoon. And we get in these deep conversations, and my goal is to figure out how to market this. I've talked about it. I was at LA County Office of Education a couple months ago doing a presentation. I just did a brief overview of some of this data with them. So then I got a lot more questions after, because the big question was, where'd you get the data? And it's reported data. It's actual data that we have. And as you can see, Corey put some DataQuest reports in to the presentation so people could see the context of where we're getting our data. And I think this will make a big difference. Last year I spoke at the state PTA conference, and they asked me to talk about CTE and not about everybody going to college. They wanted to see what other options were out there. And you're right, talking to high school counselors, I was a high school principal for years, and in their minds, it's all about, getting your FAFSA form filled out, submitted, completing all your A through G, because everybody's going to go to college. And we don't have those on-ramps for some of those students that are not going to complete their A through G requirements. And there are other options for them, and we need to make those clear to those students that there are some serious options for them to consider going forward. But I think this type of data will help people understand the story of CTE and the difference it could make in a lot of students' lives. So this is, like we've said, we want to put this story together and be able to tell the story to everybody.
And thanks for that, Pete. And I think you spawned another question of mine, and I have another question also. First is the students who I would like to see maybe an overlay with some of this with these students and those who complete the A through G requirements. I mean, if you take a CTE pathway, is your rate of completing A through G higher, right? At the schools that offer A through G. There was a discussion we had not terribly long ago, maybe around the Board of Governors meeting last week, where we discussed like which schools meet the A through G requirements, which schools even offer a complete A through G set of courses. And but seeing this as an overlay to the data we've got already, I think would be helpful. Is maybe it makes them more career or college ready. The second question I had was related to something Member Grande had alluded to earlier, was taking out of the data we have about employment and taking a look at the industries that they're in. I saw there were a few industries, some related to hospitality, tourism, some related to services. And so I would like to explore a couple of these areas a little deeper. The question I had about this was, in those students where we have a large population of the students that are in certain industries, which sector within those industries are they in, right? So my concern is that maybe we have a lot of folks in hospitality tourism, but are they doing like frontline hotel work that may be lower wage, or are they in a field that is higher wage? If they're in a service sector, are they working at like a fast food restaurant instead of, in like maybe some type of technology field or service related to higher wage positions there. So getting a little deeper dive into that. And then as that aligns with what CTE pathway were they on and how does that align with it? So those are a couple areas I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think we do need to look into that. To answer, just a quick answer to your first question, we do have a program that's been around for a long time, our California Partnership Academies program, and there are requirements. You have to complete a CTE pathway, and you have to complete all of your A through G requirements to be part of that program. And it's a cohort of students at a school, and it's grades 10 through 12. And our A through G completion rate for our Partnership Academy students is somewhere around between 65 and 70%, and the state rate is in the 40s. And they're completing a pathway at the same time. So, that, and it's a different model, but it's been around for 35 years, and I've had those pathways at my schools where I was a principal, and those are my really successful students, and they have to be considered in some at-risk type of category to even get into the academy.
So that is really great to know, and I can touch base with you on this a little later. I know that we've talked a little bit in the past about best practices, right? And I think those are great examples of best practices that we might want to lift up a little bit and speak about a little bit more and share out with the field. So we might want to get some exemplar, kind of schools and programs like that and put it on a future agenda for us.
Absolutely.
So, Member Rodriguez, you got your hand up again.
Yes, and just one more thing as I'm hearing you speak, and I appreciate all of your comments and questions, and Pete, the clarification and your the points that you just made. Thank you for that. And I was thinking about, one of my first meetings here with CWPJAC, where we were talking. We had a presentation, and I believe it was from Riverside and San Diego County, talking about the sort of the transition from what people see as whether it's home economics or shop to CTE, right? And that how we're working to change that so that parents know that that this is, students are gaining skills, they're gaining academic skills, and are either going into careers or college, right? That it's not an either or as it was many years ago with shop classes or what have you. And so I think that this data, one, it helps with that message. And so perhaps also looking at the lens of parents as we're presenting this data, right? As Member Escobedo said, it's important for districts to have this information so that they can see the benefits and plan with the community to see what professions are needed and how we can create programs and pathways within our schools that meet those needs, right? Because like Member McQuillan his community has very different needs than mine down here in El Centro. And then second, also a message for parents within that data, that they can see it through their lens and go, wow, this is amazing, and have their support and their voice in the planning process, I think would be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, very good insights there. All right. Any other comments from members of the committee? All right. Then with that, we'll open it up for public comment. And I know it does take a moment for folks to get their feedback done online. So we'll give this a minute. Are there any public comments? There were some Q&A before. I assume those were answered through our other questions.
Yes, the Q&A have been mostly answered through our questions. I would like to remind everyone that if you do ask a question through the Q&A and you are listed as anonymous, we cannot address your question. You must list your name to be able to qualify for a full public comment. It appears we don't have any public comment on this item.
Really? All right. Well, I thought that people would be jumping in on this one. All right. So if there are no public comments other than what was in the Q&A earlier, then that concludes this item, which is really great. We are pretty much down to the last little section here. So we are on item number 4, and I think here we have Sandra Sanchez, Interim Vice Chancellor for the Workforce Economic Development Division, coming to present to us.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair Rawlings and members of the Joint Advisory Committee. As Member Rawlings stated, I am Sandra Sanchez. I'm the Interim Vice Chancellor for the Workforce and Economic Development Division at the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. Today, we're going to provide you with an overview of the latest updates to the Strong Workforce K-12 dashboard that are being planned and implemented this year. Next slide, please. All right, so joining me today are Executive Vice Chancellor Dr. John Hetz for the Office of Innovation Data, Evidence, and Analytics at the Chancellor's Office, as well as our partners at WestEd, Karen Beltramo, Senior Project Manager, and Ravinder Singh, Senior Program Associate. Next slide, please. Today, we're going to provide a brief overview of this suite of dashboards on the launch board. Since our last update, we have incorporated additional awardees of the Strong Workforce K-12 funding in rounds 2 and 3 with additional years of data. We will also be sharing this information in the staging environment today to show you these updates. Part of the challenge we've had is we've been integrating additional data that was submitted after the deadline, and that data integration will be pushed out on a refresh in the next month after we've integrated that additional data. So as part of the agenda and the overview today, we're going to review the suite of dashboards, and then we're going to actually give you a live demo and allow some time for question and answer. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. John Hetz.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So we're just going to walk you through a little bit what the launch board is here at the Chancellor's Office and what it does. So it's a suite of dashboards that are publicly available that all rely on student-level data to build out both accountability metrics for our system, as well as continuous improvement metrics to help across all kinds of work. So we have our statewide dashboard that helps us track outcomes across all of our students. That's the student success metrics. We have the California Adult Education Pipeline that tracks both CDE and community college outcomes for adult ed students. We have the community college pipeline that is a soup to nuts, has everything in it that you might be interested in and understanding what's happening for community college students. And we have a dashboard that's specific to our community college strong workforce program. In addition, we've added the K-12 strong workforce program dashboard. And this has data from LEAs and institutions that were awardees in the first 3 rounds who have successfully uploaded their CalPADS files. So that's an important caveat for colleges or for LEAs that haven't done that. They wouldn't be represented in the dashboard. Just a couple of caveats, because some of this data gets pretty small in terms of the number of students. There are places where you may go to look at the results for a particular LEA and a particular disaggregation may not show. And the reason for that is FERPA suppression and complementary suppression rules that we've worked out to protect the identification of student data is strictly enforced across all of these dashboards. And so that means sometimes if you have in a view that you're looking at one group that has less than 10 students, where you could start to maybe know the outcomes of particular students, that group will be suppressed and another group will be suppressed so that you can't figure out those that first group's set of students. So I just wanted to let everyone know. So when you're looking at it, there may be places where we have combined groups together that you might want to see separately, but we can't represent that publicly. Next slide. And so basically, unfortunately, I jumped ahead of myself. So the K-12 SWP dashboard is slightly different than our other dashboards. It displays data for students enrolled in grades 9 through 12 at a CalPlus participant K-12 institution. So the LEAs have to put their data into CalPass Plus. who were awarded K-12 funding. And so it's much more restricted to a snapshot view in time for students who met each particular metric outcome in a particular selected year. So it doesn't track a cohort of students. It is a snapshot of a year in time. We're anticipating the possibility that if this continues, we may be able to construct a cohort view at a later date, but that would require the integration of additional data that we don't have access to yet. So we do have things like that. We've built some cohort views. If you want to look at what that would look like, you can look at the student success metrics, for example, that follows certain students over time and sees those outcomes. So we're hoping to be able to build something like that. And I've already gone through a number of our other dashboards. The other thing I would just point out, if you're interested in things like what's happening with CTE students at our community colleges separately, both the Strong Workforce Program and the Community College Pipeline have display metrics across a variety of things, and you can select at the program level or top code level to look at what happens for students in particular CTE fields as they progress through the community colleges. So I just wanted to pause before I take a pause to see if there's any questions about what the launch board does or what it is.
Any questions, folks? All right, seeing none.
All right, so then one more slide for me. So if we could go to the next slide. So we just want to make sure that people understand what the limitations of this dashboard is. So the data for the K-12 SWP dashboard only includes data for an institution or an LEA if they receive K-12 funding, right? So if they receive that funding, they could be in there. But there are a couple of other things. All the CalPADS files must be successfully uploaded to CalPAS Plus. So occasionally we have LEAs that don't quite get those in, or they're corrupted, or they have missing files or missing years. That can have some impacts. And so with every new release, if the LEAs don't continue to get their data in on time, as was referenced earlier by Vice Chancellor Sanchez, that can cause some gaps and issues with the data. Additionally, the data that we put in our dashboards at the student level, it is aggregated and presented, but it requires student level data. And so we're working with that to help represent what's happening with students. That makes it a challenge for situations where we don't have the student level data available. So a couple of ways that this is a real challenge for this dashboard. So for example, it makes it difficult to track student outcomes over time because we don't have data that predate the funding. And it makes it difficult for us to establish basic things like what a cohort would be if we want to do something like graduation rate, because we only have when the funding starts and the unitary data starting from there. So we don't know for students who are in 11th grade whether or not they would be in a 12th grade graduating cohort or not, for example, right? So there are some challenges to the data that we have here. And so not having the precursor data, not having comparison data for K-12 LEAs that aren't participating makes it a little bit harder to do some of the comparisons that we'd actually like to do. So just wanted to kind of make you aware of this is not quite the universe of everything that we'd love it to be, but it still gives us good purchase on understanding what the outcomes for students and institutions that are receiving this fund. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our support team at WestEd, I believe starting with Ravinder.
Thanks, John. Good morning, Chair Rawlings. Good morning, committee members. So my name is Ravinder Singh, and I work at WestEd, and we, in partnership with ERP, Education Results Partnership, help the Chancellor's Office design and post these websites, or dashboards, I should say, each year. And I'm joined by my colleague, Karen, who's going to help me out in a second. And we're really going to go over what is updated in this dashboard. As some of you may recall, we spoke with you guys last fall, November 29th, I believe, and we presented the first version of this dashboard. We're here today to talk to you about version number 2. So we basically version the dashboards annually. That's sort of when we will update the dashboard each year, would be around the spring of each year. So this is version 2. Today we're going to be actually demoing the dashboard in a staging environment, and I'll tell you a little bit about that when we get into the demo. But there is a dashboard that's version 2 that's publicly available now. So Karen and I will go into how to access it and how you can navigate the dashboard during the demo. But I have a few slides this morning. I want to cover the universe of students that are included in the dashboard, so everyone's clear about who's in the dashboard. Then I want to talk about a couple of things that have been added as far as rounds of awardees data that's been added, and then also a couple of new metrics that have been added. And then Karen's going to go into further detail about some of these updates. So as you may recall, the universe of students includes all awardees by round. So this year with version 2, we have rounds 1, 2, and 3 included. So these are all students at a CalPass Plus participant K-12 institution. So what does that mean? So first, let's start off with they were awarded K-12 SWP funding. So that's our universe of LEAs that would be included. Then that LEA has to be a CalPass Plus participant, meaning they have to have an MOU with CalPass Plus, and they have to upload their CalPads files. We worked closely with CDE to identify where we could find the data elements that were necessary for the metrics that are displayed in the dashboard. So all of the awardees are familiar with which files need to be uploaded so that we can build this dashboard. So if you're an awardee, you've been asked to submit your data, and if you've submitted it successfully, you are now included in the dashboard. And that's the case for rounds 1, 2, and 3. As the dashboard, as the funding years grow, and as we put out different iterations of the dashboard, you'll see more and more data. So round 1 was funded in spring of 2019. So we start off with school year 18-19, and we now have data all the way through school year 21-22. So there's 4 years of data for round 1 awardees. Round 2 has 2 years of data, and round 3 has 1 year of data. As the years progress, we'll have more and more data for each one of these rounds. All of the rounds, their data are displayed at several levels. They're displayed at the county, region, and statewide levels as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of what we'll show in the demo. We wanted to make it easy for people to be able to identify the years of data available by rounds. So we have is round 1 awardees are colored in blue, round 2 awardees are colored in green, and round 3 awardees are colored in the orange bar. So Karen and I will show you this in the demo, and what you have here is just a screen grab of all of the K-12 students in the Strong Workforce Program that throughout the 3 years awardees rounds that have been displayed at this dashboard. So we'll talk a little bit more about this in the demo. Next slide, please. So as I was mentioning earlier, we've added 3 new metrics to the dashboard this year. So if you may recall from last fall, we had all of the metrics that are just shown on your screen that are not in the green box. So those still stay there. So for instance, we have a count of all K-12 students and K-12 CTE students. Again, these are K-12 SWP funded schools. Then for progress, we have a count of K-12 CTE participants, CTE completers by industry sector, and then those CTE completers with early college credit, work-based learning, or third-party certification, and then again, those by industry sector with all of those. And then for success, we had K-12 students who graduated from high school and K-12 CTE students who graduated from high school. And what we've added in version 2 of the dashboard is the following 3. We have now the CTE participants who graduated from high school, the completers who graduated from high school, and the completers who graduated with the early college credit, work-based learning, or third-party certification who graduated from high school. And again, we'll just demo this in the dashboard later on. So I think this was my last slide. Karen, I believe you're about to go over some more of the updates that we've done.
Thanks, Ravinder.
Yeah.
Yeah, Karen Beltramo. I'm a senior project manager at WestEd. I've been working on the Launchboard board for about over 5 years now. So this first dashboard was quite a lift. As John explained, it kind of is a little bit outside of the ways the other dashboards work together. But one of the nice things we have on some of the other dashboards is this comparison function that we've added as part of the second release. So basically, you can compare awardees in different rounds of funding. You could compare an LEA to their county, an LEA to their region. You compare region to region. You can do anything you want, basically, with those boxes and drill downs. For the time trend display or for any disaggregation. And so the only caveat to this a little bit that I hesitate or just tell people is all the metrics in the K-12 SWP dashboard are displayed as percentages, except for two. And so when you're doing comparison, especially like it's statewide to a region or statewide to an LEA, those count metrics are kind of funky because the legend then will just make one big, one small. So it really works well, the comparison for percentages. And next slide, please. So here's just a screenshot of taking two counties that are in the Bay region right by each other. And just looking at round one awardees, so LEAs that were awarded round one funding in Alameda County versus Contra Costa County. And so the legend there is going to show you what comparison selections you've made. And we're going to demo this a little bit as time allows. And so the hover is going to give you all the information that you need, right? So it gives you the value, the denominator or size of the student group, and then, of course, the percentage, right? So here we're seeing that out of the 43,000 students in Alameda County from the LEAs in round one, 41% or 17,700 were CT participants in this happens to be 21-22 versus Contra Costa, which was slightly lower. Out of their 42,000 students, or almost 43,000 students, 38% were CT participants. So it just gives you an idea of how to put your data in context, which we think is really important. That's one of the real powers we feel like with the dashboard is how do you know if a 40% or 41% CT participation rate is good or not, right? So it's like just putting it in context of whatever you think is appropriate to compare to. And next slide, please. And now I understand this slide is rather busy. This is our this is the busiest disaggregation that we have by race, ethnicity. So what we're showing here is that we're saying with the same example, the hover is going to tell you out of the number of students in the population, right, of the disaggregation or drill down that you selected. In our case here, we said students who identified as Black or African American, right, which is the denominator displayed in the hover over, how many of those Black or African American students were K-12 CT participants, which is the numerator, and what percentage does that represent for students who identify as Black or African American, right? So again, this is where for awardees of round one funding, 41% of students who identified as Black or African American students in Alameda County were K-12 CT participants in 21-22 versus 37% of students who identified as Black or African American students in Contra Costa County were CT participants in 21-22. And with that, I'm going to pass back over to Ravinder Singh to kick us off for the demo. And if possible, if I could start sharing my screen.
So as Karen's getting us to the website to do the demo, I mentioned this earlier, so just want to be clear about a couple of things. What we're about to demo for you is not publicly available. There is a version 2 that's publicly available, but what's happened is, so we have this cadence. So by legislation, the awardees are required to submit data by November of the calendar year. And because of the holidays, the Chancellor's office has, allowed the submissions to continue into the new year, just so we capture as many of the records as we can. So we froze the data, meaning that's when we built the dashboard was January 18th of 2023. And we'll show you where we, indicate that so people who know or are looking at the dashboard data, they can tell when the data was frozen. So subsequent to that, we worked really hard to get additional LEAs to submit data. We noticed that several of the large school districts were missing their data. So we have now successfully uploaded their data, and we are going to refresh this dashboard. The public viewing of what you're seeing today will be available probably in early to mid-June. So just note that. So if you go to the dashboard and you go to the public site, you're like, oh, well, this didn't look like what you saw on the demo. You will soon see it. It's just in the staging environment. So Karen has taken us to the Launchboard homepage, which you can Google very easily. Just Google Launchboard and it'll come up. And once you get to this page, we want to show you how to get to your dashboard. So that's the K-12 SWP dashboard. Thank you, Karen. So Chair Rawlings, I don't know. I think we're a little ahead of time. Hopefully you guys would like a more thorough demo. Karen and I had a short version and a long version. We're happy to stay on to answer questions, but we'll go ahead and proceed with what we were going to demo, and then we're happy to navigate further if any committee members have questions. Okay, so just a quick overview, since we do have time here, is like when you get to this page, what are you looking at? So you're looking, again, clearly it shows you you're looking at the K-12 SWP dashboard. There's a couple of features here that you want to know about, and that's in the light blue ribbon at the top of the navigation there. So the first thing, Karen, if you could navigate, you can show that this is the drop-down menu where you can choose your rounds of funding, or you can choose all rounds of funding. So you can see clearly rounds 1, 2, and 3, and then all rounds. The next drop-down menu is actually at which level you would like to look at the data. So at the top, you see statewide, region, county, LEA, and then even at the institution level. So again, you select it by selecting the radio button, and then you go down in a drop down. So you can either type it in or you can go through the scroll. Great. So Karen's just demonstrating how you would do that. And then the third drop down is the year. And again, as you may recall, our data collection started in 1819, and now we have 4 years of data. So you can look at it by a particular year as well. And then finally, the last drill down is some of the demographics and the time trends that you can select by. And Karen's scrolling through all the different ones you can. One of the things you want to always do is you want to click the view button there after you've changed your selections. And what you should see appear in the light blue bar is what you are viewing. So you might think, oh, okay, I've selected all of these and you forgot the view button. Always look at where Karen's cursor is there to show you what you are actually viewing. So Karen, I think we were thinking about showing the committee members basically some of the functionality that we've added and some of the new metrics that we've added. So do you want to navigate us to the first thing? So the first thing there is the student types. Again, we were talking to you guys earlier. This is I believe this was on my slide, which showed you the number of students by round and the different colors for the rounds.
Yeah, and you can always deselect if you'd like to anything on the legend here. That's just a nice common functionality across our dashboards. Let's say you really just want to look at round one. It's almost always you can deselect what's displayed there. I'm not sure how that red thing got on the screen.
It's great. Someone was
pointing something out there.
Yeah.
We do want to be really clear too, Ravinder. Just we have time. Let's make an LEA selection. So it's really cool. We have all rounds selected here. As we said, you could start with just one round, but of course, if you're at the LEA level, I'm going to stick with Alameda just because that's near Ravinder. He's in Oakland. And let's say we stick at the LEA level, even though we have all rounds selected. If you're at the LEA or institution level, right, that doesn't matter really. You have all rounds selected. It's the same, right? You're not going to have different data, but it will tell you the legend, the rounds that they've been funded in this particular LEA or institution. So sometimes you might see just round one. Here's round 1, 2, 3. But this is how you'll see the display for an LEA or a institution.
Right.
And anything like the region. So if you're at a region level, for example, you can see, obviously all the LEAs that roll up to round one in this year that's in common 2020, 2021, this, slightly different counts versus the LEAs that were funded in round two.
Great. So one of the things that I want to point out before we look at the metrics, I just realized I didn't show this, Karen, is the comparison view. Do you want to walk us through that? Yeah, so let's just stick with the two counties we did, I guess. Just that's what we had in the example. Again, you can, if you wanted to stick statewide, you could compare different rounds of funding. The only thing that, you can't, I've seen people do this effectively. It's just, I tend to stick with the same year, but it's whatever. You can do whatever you want to in these three drop downs to compare. And this is where, we do have counts, the count metric. And again, like I said, this isn't percentage, this is one of our count metrics. But you get down here as your percentage where with the hover over and a reminder of the coloring and what you've selected, right? You can only do one round at a time for a comparison, right? You couldn't do all rounds. It would get really busy really fast. And so this is just a nice time trend comparison, and you have all the years available. And then just quickly, if you do want to go, let's go to a disaggregation or a drill down. Let's go to gender. It's just a nice way to compare. Again, a first metrics count. So I'm going to scroll down to a percentage. Let's look at participants maybe and see how those compare across the two counties. Again, this is, we're back to our idea that Executive Vice Chancellor John Hetz was talking about. We are missing some data still for some students because that data was submitted prior to 2018-19 or the files that contain that data. They'll let us know what gender students have identified as or been categorized as. But here's where you can easily see comparisons between any of those disaggregations. And then let's go back up here to maybe look at the new metrics now, Ravinder. Yeah, that'd be great.
So let's just go back to our
metrics.
Yeah. So okay, so we're back here to reviewing for round one. I'm actually go to all rounds again. And if you remember from our demo last time, these buttons here, our metrics are always organized like we like to say like a student journey or a student. I'm trying to think of another word than student journey, but I seem to always land there. Basically, we always start with who's included in the dashboard, our student types, progress while with us, which is most of the metrics, and then K-12 transition. That was that step ladder that Ravinder showed you. So I'm going to go down here to that section. And then do you want to walk us? Oh, I still have the gender disaggregation.
Yeah, I was just about to tell you if you do the time trend there.
Yeah, so let's go do time trend and hit view. And then go back down here to the transition.
Yeah.
And so this, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I was just going to say that, so this metric already existed, right? We had the counts of students who graduated from high school. We cannot replicate graduation rates, so we try to stay away from that language. We had this percentage of those students who graduated from high school who received a high school diploma in the year. So in 21-22, what percent were CT students, right, for each of the rounds of funding? Now we've added what percent were CT participants, what percent were completers, and then what percent were completers with early college credit, work-based learning, or third-party certification.
Hey, Karen, if we could, we have our captioner. I have been a bit of a taskmaster in having our captioner power all the way through all this. If we could, we'd like to take a couple-minute break and then jump back into this so that the captioner can get a break here real quick.
Of course.
Is that all right? Is there? So actually, what we'll do is let's take a 5-minute break if we can, and then we can come back and jump in on this because I think some folks may have some questions on it.
Great. I'll stop sharing then and go on mute. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. So we'll be back here at, I see 11:07 right now. Let's come back at 11:12.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for the break. Many thanks to our captioners. If anyone thinks that our captions have been auto-generated, you can tell our captioners are the best because they don't skip a beat, even as we go through all this. So I just love our team up at CDE and the work that they do for us. So with that, we will go back to Karen from West Ed and to continue the show.
Great, thanks. Ravinder, do you want to just finish up with some of the resources on the dashboard before we go to questions?
Sure. So again, Chair Rawlings, we're happy to navigate as committee members want any of the other features, but just to finish out our demo, we do want to point out how you can get some resources to support your understanding of the dashboard. So first and foremost, for each of our dashboards, we have what's called a dictionary, and that dictionary explains exactly how the metric or the thing that you're viewing was constructed. So please always consult the dictionary if you have any questions about like, oh, who's counted? How was that calculation made? What were the data elements? Where was the data from? All of that's listed in detail in the dictionary. And you can click it right there where the cursor is pointing to. The other cool feature that we did was this mapping. So we understood as people were given different levels of data, they'd want to know like, hey, how does my institution map to which LEA? I mean, obviously, if you're in an institution, you'd know which LEA you were in, but then you would also be able to look at the county and the region as well. So this mapping is great. It also includes the rounds of funding.
Yeah, so which rounds are funded in? I think that's important to add, Ravinder. Sorry. From the resources that we have, every single institution will show what rounds of funding if they've been included in.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few more items there. You can see an overview of the K-12 SWP program, FAQ. The other thing I want to point out here is just above these resources are the 3 important addresses that you can email. So if you have a question about the K-12 SWP program, please reach out to the Chancellor's office. That's 4cno.edu. For questions about the dashboard, reach out to us, the Launchboard team, and that's at Launchboard at the Chancellor's office as well. And then finally, if you have any questions about the data that was submitted, please reach out to our partner at CalPass Plus. Because they can help you submit files, or they can help you sleuth why there's certain data missing, or what's going on with any of their data in the dashboard. So just want to point out those 3 important email addresses. So I think I'll stop there, Chair Rawlings, and see if you have questions or if any of your committee members have questions.
All right. Thank you for this. I think we, between AMARD and our ideas team at the Chancellor's office, we've got a pretty crack set of data folks working on these things, and your help here kind of synthesizing it all is really helpful as well. Any questions from members of the committee? I'm not seeing anyone's hands. Is that right? All right. So I see Member Rodriguez. There we go. Thank you.
Yes, I just want to make a comment and thank you for all of your work with this. This is really impressive data, and bringing it all together, I think, will inform a lot of the decisions that are made at the site level. And so thank you. Thank you for your work and for the demo.
Any other comments or questions from folks? All right. I am not seeing any. Ravinder, Karen, thank you so much for your work on this. Super impressive. And I know we will have more work to do. But getting this out there, I'm really looking forward to having the public be able to see it in June and really be able to dig into some of this. I think it really sets a lot of context to it. So that's helpful. All right. With that, is there any public comment on this item? I don't see any hands raised in the Zoom session.
No public comment this
There are no public comment on this item. All right. So then that will conclude this item. And so this gets us, I think, down to our general public comment. So if there are any members of the public here participating via the webinar that would like to make comments on items that are within our purview but not on the agenda, now is the time to do it. And so if you would, you can raise your hand, you can toss it in the chat, you can email it, all those different ways to do it. And we will give a moment in case there's any comments that folks would like to make.
There's no public comment on this item.
All right. So with that, that concludes our business. I think we've gotten a lot of really great information today. I know that we will be looking forward to getting the slide deck from the earlier presentation, and I'd be looking forward to possibly re-agendizing some of the data metrics and really dig into the questions next time. I think it's been part of the idea here is over the course of the next few meetings to really be able to dig into some of the data metrics, get a better understanding and make sure our questions are getting out there. But really with the focus of being ready to make the recommendations as Pete had mentioned earlier, that around November or so or earlier, by November, we would need to have a list of recommendations on any changes, any tweaks we want to make, and have that ready. So I'd be looking for feedback at each meeting, hopefully over the next few months on the metrics. My favorite thing is data. So this will be a data-focused year, and being ready to make those recommendations so that we can build the proper framework and scaffolding for future years to build on. And so with that, we have a tentative schedule we're going to have to build out for our next few meetings. So members of the committee, just look for notices from our staff, our support folks, and be ready to respond with your available dates. But if there are no other comments from members of the committee, then that will adjourn our meeting at 11:21. Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.